Hey everyone, Brandon Sowers here, running for Congress again in Arizona, District 1. And I'd love to be able to bring an amazing guest on today to talk about some very issues, a lot of issues that are happening in our MAGA movement, and it's very controversial. So this is Jake. Jake, please introduce yourself and tell us why we should actually listen to you and what your background is so we can give our listeners a little insight first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on, Brandon, and good luck with the election. So, my name is Jake Donnelly. I call myself the Red, White, and Blue Jew. It's a moniker, of course, but also it's exactly what I believe in, the red, white, and blue, because I grew up on a farm in Connecticut, the son of a Vietnam tanker, a guy who was born dirt poor in 1941, Waterbury, Connecticut, and the son of a entrepreneur, a small business owner who bet on herself and ended up, without taking a vacation, for more than 20 years, turning a senior residential community of 114 beds into the most successful senior residential community in the area. So I really understand what this country is about. I have seen the American dream lived not just by my dad, going from abject poverty to the middle class by the time that he died, but I also saw my mom, who went from the middle class into a higher class by engaging with the promise of America, which is high risk, high reward. So I really do love this country. As I said, I grew up on a farm. My earliest memories are of collecting chicken eggs, feeding horses, and milking cows. I know what this country is about. You work hard and you get what you get. I played baseball in college. I ended up moving to Israel full time, making what's known as Aliyah and gaining Israeli citizenship back in 2018. Although I had lived there for most of the prior about 3 years or so, doing several internships. And that's just because I'm Jewish. And there's a certain call for many Jews to go to Israel and to experience where our religion was formed. And it's the same thing for Christians. And it's why I truly love Israel, because you can go to the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, and you can actually walk the steps that Jesus walked himself. You can see the places where he delivered sermons. I love the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I just want equality for all in the United States of America, whether that be economic equality, not equity, but equality, where if you put in the work, you get what you get. I don't know many people that didn't take vacations for 20 years like my mom, but I also want freedom of religion, and I want this country to become what Frederick Douglass thought that it could become. And that's why I get so annoyed when people talk about how tough their life is. I look at somebody like Frederick Douglass, who was born a slave, and by the end of his life, he was extolling the virtues and the promise of the United States of America. And I'm trying to do that in my own way, which can be a little bit blue. I do swear a lot. I'm sorry, son of a Marine and a farmer, so that tends to happen in addition to being an athlete. But I just want that message to get across, that this is America, and whatever you want, you can make something out of yourself so long as you put in that work.
I totally agree. I mean, in this day and age, we see a lot of 20-year-olds that are getting on YouTube, learning new skills, and definitely growing their own business, their own entrepreneurship, and excelling. But then on the flip side, we have a lot of people that take, stuff for granted, and it sounds like there's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of just things that they're wishing that they could, change. And I'd like to actually dive into some of that. We're hearing affordability with housing is becoming an issue. Inflation. We're looking at some of the things that are affecting middle class on a regular basis. And let's get into that in a little bit too. So one of my things is changing from a meaningless issue to a meaningful issue. That's like my biggest take here. So you and I are relatively around the same age. We've gone through things that seemed fairly meaningless. Like, for example, when we went to Iraq, so let's start getting into this. There was an assumption that there was weapons of mass destruction. And even some of my friends went there. There was nothing to be found. We killed, as an American government, over 1 million civilians, which didn't really seem like a good thing, right? Like, it didn't really make peace or prosperity for us in the middle class. And I know this could be a sensitive subject, but I definitely want to dive into this. It seemed meaningless, right? It seemed like we went there and it became a meaningless war. How do we change that to become meaningful? How do we, from your vision, from your perspective, even being a Jewish American, what do you want to see And just from a war perspective, what do you want to see American citizens to actually feel meaningful again? Right? So do you believe that we should get into more wars? Do you believe that wars is effective for us? Or like let's just dive into that. That's going to be, kind of a grenade in this whole conversation.
On the macro, no. On the micro, yes. It's dependent on what wars. And if you're going to talk about like bombing Fordo and stopping Iran, that's death to America. Iran, who put out a hit not just on our president, Donald Trump, but also on Mike Pompeo. And we have a 12-day war that Israel does for the rest of the world, essentially, by stopping the Iranians from getting nuclear weapons or enriching their uranium past 60% when what you need for civilian purposes is literally 1/6 of that. Yes, that's a good thing. I also don't consider that a war. I don't consider a couple of flights, a couple of sorties by B 2 bombers to be a war. I say that that is actually something that's avoiding war because I am of the Trumpian perspective of peace through strength. I would rather do what we can to avoid wars. In other words, I don't like the whole Neville Chamberlain and appeasement. You can see how that goes. What Biden did, what Obama did. Hey, you know what? You just have to wait for me to win my second term, and then you, Russia, you can go into Crimea. That's how wars start. That's actually how wars start. Going in and stopping that from happening would stop the war right now that's occurring between Russia and Ukraine. When it comes to Iraq, a lot of bad information. I'll point out that Benjamin Netanyahu actually said, don't go in there. The real threat to everybody in the Middle East is Iran. So he nailed that one. But do I like wars? No. Nobody likes wars, but there's a difference between my perspective and that of somebody like Dave Smith, where Dave Smith is going to try to avoid wars at all cost. Some wars, unfortunately, have to be fought. And America and the greatness of America is really a testament to that because, of course, we didn't want to fight World War II. We were dragged into it first by the Japanese and then by the Germans. And, of course, when we come in, we win our wars. But once we get into those wars, we have to prosecute those wars, I think, better than we have. And the adage that I like to go to when it comes to a conversation like this is that our soldiers win the wars and then our politicians, actually, let me rephrase that. Our soldiers win the battles and then our politicians lose the wars. Donald Trump is the rare politician who wins the war. Our Secretary of War, I know it's defense, but I love the idea that we're calling it Secretary of War again. But our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, those are guys and politicians that actually know how to win wars. So I look at Venezuela right now, and I don't see that we're going to have 100,000 troops on the ground, but I do see that Donald Trump and his administration are going to stop Americans from dying of drug poisoning, not overdoses, but drug poisoning, which is what all of those fentanyl deaths are. And so I hope that makes sense. No on the macro, but dependent on the war and the micro, sometimes yes.
Absolutely. I definitely think transparency is key. So definitely to your point, like why are we doing what we're doing, right? And let's get into, kind of what's happening right now with Venezuela. What is your perspective? Like why are we even in conflict with Venezuela? Just so I can hear it.
Yeah, because they're a nefarious actor in the in our hemisphere, even though technically they're over in the southern hemisphere. But with Venezuela, it's the fact that they're sending drug runners who are murdering Americans by with their cocaine and their fentanyl-laced cocaine, and that is terrible for not just America writ large, but for individual Americans and for everybody that is truly worried about the middle and lower class Americans who are struggling right now. One of the big things that they are struggling with is addiction, is drug overdoses and drug poisonings. And how do you stop that? You stop that by going after China. You stop that by going after Venezuela. And you stop that by making sure our border is secure. So I don't just see Venezuela as kind of a one-off. I see it as more of a little part of a bigger picture where we're trying to stop the drugs that are coming into America and murdering Americans that are coming from China and Mexico and Venezuela. And I think if you stop it in Venezuela, you knock out one domino and then you take out the next domino, and then you can isolate China, and that's where it really gets interesting.
Yeah, it seems like Trump's done a great job on securing the border. As we know, like we barely see anyone going, almost even like zero people going across the border. And of course, that's going to affect the drugs coming through. And we know that it comes through in specific areas. Before Trump, in the Biden administration, we saw so many immigrants coming in. It was a very strong open border. Now, there's some theories that it could be because Democrats wanted more votes in specific areas. There's other theories where George Soros is very focused on open society. George Soros seems he's Jewish, is he not? Like, is there a evil agenda to maybe bring in a bunch of immigrants to what we call like mix the race? I think we're starting to get into that fringe stuff that we're looking at online and going, what's true and what's not true, right? So I just want to like bring it out in the open. Is there some weird Jewish evil plan to mix all the races so the Jewish people become the only ones to rule the world? Let's just like go right at that issue.
So I'm going to do it backwards. First and
Yeah.
foremost, there is no Jewish plan to rule the world. In fact, the reason I love the United States of America so much is because it perfectly aligns with Jewish values, traditional Jewish values, which are essentially, if you don't bother me, I won't bother you, aka the leave me alone doctrine. That's what being Jewish is about. We don't try to convert. In fact, it's actually barred from us to do so. The whole idea that the Jews are the chosen people is kind of a misreading. It's chosen to do God's commandments. That's what we're chosen to do. We have 613 commandments. If you're not Jewish, you only have 7 commandments, and they're pretty solid ones, like do not murder, do not steal, do not harm animals, and things like that. It's really solid stuff that everybody can get behind. But I really appreciate the question because I'm the combating anti-Semitism guy. I'm the one that looks at how Jewish organizations are trying to combat anti-Semitism, and I go, you guys are all doing it wrong. So I'm going to do it my way. You're all trying to speak English. I'm going to speak American because I think this is how I can get the message across so that those people who don't really know what's going on can actually listen. So George Soros, yes, he's Jewish. So is his son Alex. Hear me, the red, white, and blue Jew, 61205 farm boy, telling you that George Soros, Alex Soros, and the open society are one of the worst things, not just for Americans, but for the world at large, because they do this not just in America, but in multiple other countries as well. The Soros AGs are a blight on the United States of America. And Ron DeSantis, what he's doing in Florida right now, and just taking out the AGs who will not enforce the law, that's what every single conservative politician who is an executive should be doing. So all the governors, if you're a red governor and you've got a Soros AG in your area, take them out. What the Open Society is trying to do is not a Jewish plot, it's a progressive plot. And where most people get confused, and I actually do have a lot of grace for Americans when they get confused by this, most Jews in America vote Democratic. I believe the majority are progressive, but you've got about 70% of American Jews who vote Democratic. The issue is the vast majority of those Jews are not religious Jews who are upholding traditional Jewish values. And that's the difference. There is nothing Jewish about the Open Society. There is nothing Jewish at all about what George Soros is doing, because one of the things that it is when you want to be Jewish is that you're supposed to set up a Beit Din, you're supposed to set up a court of law. That's one of our big things. So to say that George Soros is doing this on behalf of the Jews is missing the fact that that is explicitly anti-Jewish. So I really do appreciate the question. I hope I clarified that issue. Yeah, he's Jewish and Alex Soros is Jewish, but they're not good Jews. And point of that is the fact that they don't believe in upholding the law.
I love that. So you're sharing a very interesting perspective that you can't put every single Jewish person under one umbrella and make that the total agenda for the Jewish people. Like literally you're condemning that progressive movement that George Soros is, advocating, right? And so I love that because now we're bringing that to light. And that goes to the second question that we see online is there's, Jewish owners of OnlyFans and Pornhub and all these other pornographic sites. And some of them even say rabbis. Like, is that a secret evil Jewish group that's trying to destroy the middle class or just even men and women of America through destroying their morals? Like, speak to that for us so we get another good perspective from your view.
It's similar to what I said about Soros, but again, that's not really engaging in Jewish behavior. Chronologically speaking, the first commandment in the Tanakh, so the Torah, the five books of Moses, the Nevi'im, which are the prophets, and the Ketuvim, which are the writings. Like that's how Jews look at the Torah. That's our big thing, yeah? So the very first commandment that God gives to people, which is Adam and Eve, is to be fruitful and multiply. Peru uvaru. Go forth. Essentially, have sex and procreate. And it's having sex for the explicit person of procreation. Now, you can have sex for the purpose of with your partner making an even better connection, as I hope you and your wife do, as me and my wife do as well. But when you're looking at, hey, this is a Jewish person that owns this, like, okay, yes, but then on the other hand, there's also a Jewish person that's saying this is not how you're supposed to act if you're Jewish. I'll point out one person, as I just had an appearance, hilariously so from my perspective, on Piers Morgan yesterday, that should air later today as we're filming this on December 4th. But Piers Morgan has on Rabbi Shmuley Batoach. He is somebody that is referred to as America's rabbi. There is not a single Jew that I know that likes Rabbi Shmuley. He and his daughter are engaged in things that I wouldn't do. Again, it's America, and I love free market capitalism, so you do what you want to do. At the same time, can I say, that's not very religious of you, Rabbi? Absolutely. Can I say you're kind of being a stain on the entire religion and the Jewish people as a whole? Yeah, I can say that, and I will say that, and I do say that. So it's, again, you can't just lump everybody together. Like, why don't we do it the other way? Why don't we point out that Ben Shapiro is a perfect example of what being Jewish is about? Why don't we point out that Dennis Prager is a perfect example of what being Jewish is about? Why don't we point out me? Not that I'm a Dennis Prager or a Ben Shapiro or anything like on the level of those guys. At the same time, if you're going to harp on the bad, I want you to at least harp on the good just as much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm seeing is there is an anti-Semitic movement happening, and it's from anger, resentment, frustration. It's in both camps, both blue and red. And my concern is we get someone that's really radical that will take on that energy and make it into an evil energy. So again, I appreciate you, being on the show because you're trying to shed light to the darkness. And again, I'm going to kind of repeat a little bit of some stuff here so our listeners can really grasp what's going on and maybe see that a lot of this is meaningless and get back to that meaningful purpose of life and going back and creating value and creating a family and creating like the American principles that we all love. So there is not some hidden agenda that the Jewish people are trying to achieve by building this third temple, destroying the rest of the races, enslaving everyone, and then killing all the Christians at the end of time. Like, let's just get that out of the,
That's not, I don't want to be glib here. That's not in any Jewish writings. And it's really funny to me as somebody that did grow up studying the Talmud. It's like, no, we don't actually care. And I mean this in the best of ways. Again, in kind of the American way, we don't really care about the other religions because what we truly care about is how we act. Judaism is all about acts. That's what commandments are. It's what are you doing this day? Do you wake up and do you say Ani? Do you say the Shema? Do you go and do you help out your wife? Or do you make sure that your baby daughter's room is clean so that by the time she comes home from daycare, your wife can actually be relaxed after her job as a preschool teacher? When it comes to the third temple, no. I'm going to say one thing real quick. A lot of the people that say that the Jews are all together organized to come up with all of these have never in their life had a conversation where there's two Jews in the conversation. The old joke, which is entirely true, is two Jews, three opinions. We're people who love to argue. That's what the Talmud is. It's all about going into the minutia of every single line in the Torah and figuring out what is the reasoning behind this, why it is that we're doing this thing. It's a lot of philosophy. It's a bunch of arguments. But like the third temple stuff, we don't do that. Like even how Jews look at the Messiah, Moshiach, how we do that is not the way that Christians look at it. It's not like Jesus Christ coming back and now everybody will be saved. That's actually not what the Moshiach is from a Jewish perspective. The Messiah is actually a political figurehead, which is why there have been multiple fake messiahs throughout Jewish history. So when it comes to that, you first have to realize Jews are never in agreement about anything. I got fired by a Jewish organization, a nonprofit Jewish organization in the greater Boston area, because we vehemently disagree with one another, or disagree with one another. So the idea that, you know what, actually Jews are all in agreement and we're going to do this third temple and we're going to enslave, there's nothing in Jewish history that says we're going to do that. We don't want it. We want to be left alone, and we want to enjoy the greatness that is the United States of America, which its promise is to be left alone.
Yeah, what I love, I feel like one of the best forms of charity that a Jew can do is give someone a job. Isn't that true? Is there something in that from a Jewish perspective?
Yes, because the way that charity, tzedakah, righteousness is done in Judaism is not actually the way that most people think. It's not like, okay, we pull our money together in the collection plate and then that money goes to another person. When you're Jewish, the rich is supposed to give just as much as the poor. There's actually a commandment, again, a mitzvah, that you're supposed to, if you're poor, give tzedakah as well, because everybody is part of the community. And when you give this charity, what you're doing is helping out the community. But the best form of charity is not to just give somebody money. The best form of charity is to give somebody opportunity. Again, American through and through. Like, I can say that about America. America wasn't great because of the welfare state. America was great because it is the land of opportunity. That's what Judaism and America is all about.
I love that. I mean, even from my perspective, I've been a business owner and started businesses my whole entire adult career and has hired, all different types of walks of life of people and really changed their lives that way. And so I could see that when you give people that opportunity, they have purpose and they're able to go out there and provide for their family. And I want to see that. There's this Jewish idiom in the New Testament when Jesus talks about if your eye is bad, then your whole body is bad. And a lot of times we think that might be like what you look at, but actually, like in Jewish idiom, it's your eye is, giving, like an aspect of giving, right? So he's really saying, like, if you don't give, your whole community will fail. And what I would love to see is a rally around the American church, all the churches in America, starting to get into venture capital, starting to get into more opportunities with their communities by saying, let's actually make a good eye, an eye that actually is giving opportunities, not just a handout, but a hand up. And we can learn that from the Jewish people. I mean, it's a Jewish idiom, right? So I love what you just said, that as a community, your goal is to provide as much opportunity as possible. And let's start doing that. What if we stopped focusing on these meaningless conspiracies and issues and actually went as a community and said, hey, let's rally our monies together, both the poor and the rich, and actually put this towards venture capital, opportunities, jobs, expansion in the local community, and actually grow from that perspective. I mean, let me know your thoughts on that.
I mean, you just described America. America federalism is make everything as hyper local as possible, because the more that it grows out, the less control you have over something. I don't, as a single individual, have control over my town, but I have more control over my town than I do my state, and of course, than I do my country. So the more hyper local you get, the better. And why should it come from the religious aspect? It should, in my opinion, because the religion is giving you the confidence. That's what most people, and you've been talking about envy and resentment, those are evil, those are sins. And that's how you really devolve, not just as an individual, but as a community and as a country. That's the stuff that tears down the edifices of everything that we've built up. Because when you start looking at the other person and going, hey, I want that, right? It's one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's, so on and so forth. But you don't do that because it's bad for you. It's not bad for the neighbor. It's the worst thing for you if you let that philosophy dig into your soul. And that's why the whole thing about your eye, it's about the perspective. How are you perceiving everything around you? And if your church can help you and help your community build the confidence that it needs to say, no, this is great and we can accomplish so much. That's the perfect combination of the religious aspect that founded the United States of America and that fortitude to go out into the wilderness, go west, young man, that made America great. And it's everything to me. And it's why I love hearing people like you. And again, thank you for having me on so we can have this discussion.
Absolutely. I think you touched a point of like covetousness, and I don't think social media is really helping in that regards, right? You can get stuck on one particular thing, and now all of a sudden, my wife is seeing all different type of makeup ads that is actually more emotional, and now it's like, why are we buying more makeup or buying more this or buying more that? And the consumption is starting to happen, but also the conspiracies. And I feel like social media is our secret war, like spiritual war that is unseen, that we actually need to look at and actually address. I heard like Australia has banned social media from 16-year-olds down, and I agree with stuff like that, because not just the online bullying, but the content that they can have, the sexualization that can happen super quickly because of access to online stuff. And so when you look at covetousness, to your point, it's like people can get really stuck into this virtual world of meaningless nonsense rather than actually being able to go to your local community and actually determine like what are the needs of the community and how do we bring more value to that community. And I believe like Shabbat was a really good example of that, where you're inviting your friends and family on that day. And I know Charlie Kirk was really big with Shabbat. I've read Abraham Heschel's Sabbath. I'm a big fan of Rabbi Abraham Heschel. And when you have that little aspect of community together, you're having that dialogue of needs. And then you can actually help in that perspective or be creative and come up with ideas. So around the dinner table is like, hey, that might be a great idea for this community. So again, I would actually like to veer off just a little bit, and I want to hear your vision on that localization approach. Where would you like to see America in the next 5 years from that perspective, that we can actually see the American principles actually flourish from that local view? So maybe give us your view from that.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to take one of the things you talked about with the social media in Australia and their 16-year-old ban and use that as the local thing. I don't think that the government writ large, like so the American government should do something like that in the way of Australia, because I want all of the rules to be done hyper locally. I want it from town to district, district to state, state then to federal level. I think that that's the way to go about it. But when it comes to how do you create that community, you do it exactly like that. You go to church. Everybody's talking about, oh, I can't find anybody. The online dating sites, those aren't fun. Da, 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 da. Go to church. You're going to find your wife or your husband if you go to church, because it's built-in value system that you agree, which is always the most difficult thing, because a lot of people, when they go online, they're like, well, now I don't know what her real values are, or I don't know what his values are. Is he a guy that goes to church? You have to figure that out through the dating app. If you go to church and you meet the person at church, you already know what their top values are. They believe in some higher power, which then means that they actually have a very static morality, which is something that America used to have. We used to know what was right and what was wrong. And I think how you fix things is by engaging or re-engaging, for the American perspective, in the religious aspect that help America figure out what was good and what was bad. So how do you build that out? You go and you do Shabbat, or you have that Sunday dinner. You have that Easter dinner. You make sure that you start talking to your family more. Give them a call. If you're going to be on your phone 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day, maybe set aside 15 minutes to call that friend of yours that you haven't talked to in a while, or call that family member that you've had a tiff with. That's how you start. Then you go and you help out the community. If you've got a farmer's market, like a lot of people in New England do, you go to the farmer's market, and maybe you don't necessarily need to buy that specialized syrup that they only have at the farmer's market, but Do you truly believe in your community? Do you want to help out that person who painstakingly went to that maple tree, tapped the tree, got the sap, and turned the sap into syrup, and said, you know what? I appreciate the hard work and the fact that you've done something with your own hands and with your own ingenuity. That's a really good way to help out. I'm a sports guy, so I truly believe that you should go and you should be a coach or a fan at the Little League game or the little soccer where all 12 of them are running around, right? After the one ball, there's no semblance of organization. That's how you build that community, because then you're meeting the other parents in your community. And the more that you do that, you'll all of a sudden, fake it till you make it, realize that you've started to build a really tight-knit and what will become a tight-knit and thriving community. And those little things are end up being the big things that help out truly your community, then your town, then your state, and then your country.
I love that. And to your point, it's very meaningful to be a soccer coach for your kids. Been doing that the last couple of seasons and just meeting the people. And it to give you a testimony of that, there are kids in there that have gained confidence just from being a part of our team. And that's what it's all about. That's that localization and bringing that value. For me, from my belief, my perspective in Congress, I want to give back power to the state. I want to bring this back from a constitutional point of view. And I feel like there's a lot of overreach that is transpiring with the federal government. But I would love to hear, if we want to move into that, what would be your like for me going into Congress, what would you want to see? Any particular changes in our current federal government?
Yeah, make Congress be Congress again, I guess would be the way I'd phrase it. Right now, Congress is a vestigial organ. They don't pass any real laws. They don't do what they're supposed to do. Now, I am somebody who enjoys the gridlock of America and the fact that, you know what, we're a limited constitutional republic and things aren't supposed to go at hyperspeed, but I despise executive orders. If something is good enough to be acted upon, it should be sent through Congress. It should go to the House and then it should go to the Senate. That's how we need to do these things. And the representatives, I don't know if it's because it's no longer how people do things, if there's too much buddy buddy stuff. I hate the idea that at the end of the day, you know what? The Republicans and the Democrats go out for beer on Capitol Hill, or probably cocktails, given how much money a lot of them make. But I don't like that idea. I actually do enjoy the fact that when we were founded, it was fisticuffs and even worse, because people really wanted to stand for what they believed in. It's not like there's a bunch of compromise now. There's way too much government. There's way too much inflation. And we shouldn't, my main thing is we really shouldn't be giving all of the power for how inflation is done to a separate entity. Like that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. So I really just want Congress to do its actual job as opposed to the executive right now. And this isn't a ding on Donald Trump. It's really a ding on the last quarter of a century of American politics. But the executive right now, to me, is kind of monarchic. Way too many executive orders by everybody. Let's actually bring it back to the people who have the power of the purse and have them be the ones that pass the bills and pass the laws.
Yeah, I love what Warren Buffett said. Like, if a balanced budget cannot be, pushed through, then everyone should be primaried, and it allows us to have transparency, accountability. Right? I mean, there's too much.
That's the word.
I feel like term limits is a big deal. We really need to see more representation. And when I first started running, a lot of the advice was, going to Congress you're gonna sacrifice your family. This is the worst place to go as a father. This is horrible as a young man to go into politics. And I'm like, that's probably the number one reason to get in, is because we need more representation, more fathers with lots of children that are in government. Because what do you think I'm going to vote on? I'm going to vote on policies for the future of my children, right? Family first. Like, if there's more fathers, there's going to be less government. Going back to the very localization theory that America was founded on, if we become better fathers, then there's going to be a better nation. And so why not bring that into Congress? And I agree with you. I think we need a lot of changes to transpire in Congress. Even on the budget side of things, I've heard, a great argument of, well, if we have, three-fourths of the Congress being able to pass some of these exemptions, then it'd be fine. Well, that always happens. Like
Yeah.
that 80% of the House will pass things. That always happens. We need like to have no exemptions, and we need to get back to a balanced budget. And one thing I'm trying to restore is also the US dollar. I think you kind of touched on that a tiny bit just there, but it's like we need to get back to printing our own monies, having sound monies, having valuable monies, so that you and I, when we work hard and we have our savings, it doesn't disintegrate like with the moths in our banking account because of inflation, which is another form of taxes, but it actually grows, right? Like as a dad, I don't know about you, but I want to pass down inheritance to my children's children, right?
Mhm.
As the Bible says. And the one way of doing that is making sure that the very hard-earned money that we have stays in that value. I think that's why Bitcoin has grown and crypto has grown and certain things have showed up on the scene. And so I know that we are a very intelligent nation of people that can come up with incredible solutions to restore the dollar again.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to, hear your take on that too.
Yeah, it's unconscionable that my dollar becomes 80 cents in 10 years because of inflation. That is ridiculous. It's stealing. It's a tax in a country where we didn't have an income tax at the beginning of this, which again, I'm not trying to boost Ron DeSantis into the Oval Office all by myself, but it's another reason why I love Florida and I've lived there before and it's so well run. And I hope that every state is as well run as Florida. But you talked about dads and politicians. My favorite politician is Nick Freitas. Are you familiar with him, Virginia Assemblyman?
No.
Okay, so he was in the military, Army guy, looks the part as well, but he and his wife, I think, have 4 children, all of whom are now out of the house, and he is only 45. So I might be getting some of those numbers a little bit wrong, but when I have somebody like you, Brandon, or Nick, talking about the issues that are important to them, I know that I can believe them as opposed to many of the other politicians because you guys are dads. You have a stake in the game and you recognize that when you go to the supermarket and eggs went from 3.45 to 4.25, something is very wrong with that because now you're taking that 50 cents I could have put in the bank and given to my money person, who, by the way, ironically is not Jewish for me, but to my financial advisor and say, hey, I want you to invest that in the right stuff so that I can now give this money to my daughter or I can give it to hopefully a son that I have down the road. That's why I really trust and love talking to guys like you because I believe that you're not just saying things to say things because you know those are the things people want to hear. You believe these things. And the number one is inflation right now, and we have to get that under control. I just want to go back 1 second, if I may, quick point, which I rarely do. The other thing I want to see from Congress, I know it's impossible with the way that everybody does stuff, but have bills that take less than 5 minutes to read. I want 5 to 10 page bills. That's it. Because who's going to read a 1,000 page omnibus bill and see where all the pork is and then have you guys vote for that in the span of 4 hours? No. Make the standalone bills. If they're good enough that they can pass, then they're good enough to stand by themselves and make you guys work. I'm sorry, that's your job. If you're going to Congress, if you're staying in there and you're going to get that pension, then you're going to have to work and start passing a bunch of bills, but bills that we can all read because then we can all be more informed, as you said, transparent, right? We need that transparency. And that's how you educate the average American so that when it comes time for voting, they know exactly what they're voting for. And that's why you don't get Mom Donnie. Sorry.
Well, I definitely see, we have 535 representatives in the House. And imagine if majority of them were just fathers and mothers with lots and lots of children. And then everything they voted on or whatever they did, that's how it would actually affect their next generations. And so you don't even have to worry about lobbyism because it would already, there'd be no compromise. It's like
Yes.
you are either sacrificing your children or you are going to benefit your children for the way you vote.
Mhm.
And that's, my whole thing and my whole agenda is, family first. So how does this bill affect the family? And one thing that I've already done, I've created a software for my campaign to help my volunteers. That's just kind of my ethos, is like, why not just build something a little bit better, more effective? But one thing in there is almost like a bill translator. So my volunteers are able to see all the bills that are coming in, and they can see very quickly like a sixth grade level reading level of what it is. And then they can see the Democrat view, the independent view, the Republican view, and they can vote on it or support it or make comments. And so imagine if I was in Congress and my entire constituents, which is 800,000 in Arizona, all different walks of life, are able to have that app, and they could be able to share to me very quickly why they support that bill. And they understand that bill, like you said. And now I become a very strong representative from a local level into the federal government. And we need more of that. Like, that's what we need. So I love what you're saying, is like, let's make bills that are transparent, more understandable, and we're not trying to hide things, especially in the last minute, so that that company or that company or that group can get, their payday. Like I said, I don't know if this is a spiritual battle, emotional battle, physical battle, but it seems like corporatocracy has really taken over America. And when you get into Congress, there's different agendas all across the board. So it's not just, AIPAC, which we'll talk about in a sec, but it's also big pharma, and it's also agriculture and pesticide, lobbyism, and big oil lobbyism, and all different types of lobbyism that is happening. And at the end of the day, for me, what really matters is, does this affect the family? And can we have something that improves the family and the local community at bay? So let's dive into another controversial thing, is AIPAC, right? A majority of the representatives in both the Senate and the House are funded by AIPAC. There's also, other big lobbyist groups. And we see in the social media, especially in the big MAGA movement and the GOP movement, that a lot of people are anti that. So from your perspective, like, I know you probably can speak and say all the good things about AIPAC, but do you have any kind of thing there where you're like, hey, let's just get rid of all foreign lobbyism and actually make sure that we don't have that? Like, let's just banter that conversation.
Well, there's a clarification. When you say funded by AIPAC, what you're saying is funded by Americans. AIPAC is made up of exclusively Americans. They do lobby for things that they know will be good for Israel, but it's also because what is good for Israel is almost always good for the United States of America. Like, you talk about the return on investment for the 3.5 billion that America gives to Israel. America actually ends up on the net positive by, in some cases, at least 6 times that on the return of investment. Now, with that being said, I'm not actually a fan of AIPAC because, again, it's made up of Americans, and the majority of American Jews are actually Democrats and liberals, if not actually progressive. So even the AIPAC people, it straddles both sides of the aisle. And I think a perfect example would be a guy that I really enjoy watching on YouTube, because I think he and his buddies are hilarious on their podcast, Unsubscribe, because I love military stuff and I love history, but it's Brandon Herrera, who is one of the biggest Second Amendment advocates possible, a guy that has his own gun machine shop, terrific dude, out in the West Texas or San Antonio? Sorry, I think it's San Antonio area. And he is going up against Alex Gonzalez. Alex Gonzalez is the AIPAC backed candidate, and I don't like Alex Gonzalez. I like Brandon Herrera. And I'm sure if you gave me a list of a bunch of people and said, which one of these do you have, it's not going to be anywhere close to me picking the 100% AIPAC backed candidate. That's just not how I work. I want the people who are the most pro 2A, the most 1A for freedom of expression and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. I want the people who align most closely with what I deem the traditional American values. So AIPAC in general, we need that clarification. AIPAC's made of Americans. It is. Now, is the answer to get rid of anything that seems like foreign lobbying? I would love that. Qatar and their investment in America and their lobbying dwarfs that of AIPAC. It's not even in the same stratosphere. It's like the two are playing completely different sports. I want to get China out of it. I want to get Iran out of it. You get Ro Khanna and Seth Moulton. Moulton's like, I'm not taking any more AIPAC money, but he is going to take Iranian lobbying money, which is really, really strange when you have to decide between the Death to America people and the people who not murder, but the people who delete American murdering terrorists. I feel like you should probably go with the people who kill the murderers. So that seems like the right one to go for there. But with AIPAC, I'm not the biggest fan of AIPAC. I'm also not the biggest person that's going to come out and condemn them because I understand what they're doing. But if the answer is you must come out against AIPAC, then okay, let's come out against any type of foreign lobbying whatsoever, even though, again, AIPAC isn't a foreign lobby. That's why they shouldn't be registered under FARA. But again, I just think that lobbying, the way that's done in America, has completely gone off the reservation. So I agree with
Yeah.
you there.
Yeah, if we kind of started getting rid of lobbyism and somehow found a way that people would give $25 to $55 a year to maybe a pool or some sort of, maybe to the candidate, but if they're able to get their small donor dollars only, then they have to hear from their constituents. Then you actually get true representation. At the end of the day, let's try to get to true representation. I agree with you. I saw the bill come through where one of these guys are trying to get rid of the Chinese funding in our school system. It's massive. It's huge.
Exactly.
So I agree with you where it's like, it's not just AIPAC. I think AIPAC has become a bullseye target at the moment because of what's transpired in Gaza. And again, being pro-human and what we saw in Iraq, I know that there are many other ways that we might be able to achieve, a mission that needs to be achieved in Gaza to help, but also to support both sides. And that became a very aggressive conversation for everyone saying, what's going on? Like, is this all because of AIPAC, right? So we could talk about that. We could talk about Gaza right now in a sec, but I want to kind of close the loop on lobbyism, because if in business, if you saw that you actually got a great deal, then you wouldn't have an issue. So I don't think the American people really know what good deal they have in supporting Israel. And I think that needs to be more transparent. So I don't know if that's something along the lines of, here's the desalination plant that Israel built for the US on California, or if that becomes one, but transparently being able to see that we have a good deal. Because you did bring something up. We put billions of dollars, send it to support for Israel, and at the moment it seems like, well, what do we get in return? Do we really have a good deal because we're just sending money? And if we see the receipts and we see the influx and we see the benefit, then it's a lot easier to say, hey, like, this is the best money can spend on this particular ally. So I don't know if you have any insights there, but let's try to maybe let the listeners know or hear or understand the benefits that we are getting as Americans in that support with Israel.
Yeah, I'll explain a couple of ways. So, we're talking about how China put a lot of money into the school system. That seems to be destroying the minds of the younger generation. And they also, of course, with Binance did TikTok, and that is absolutely poison for younger people. But you also had the Saudis doing it in the 1980s, and then the Qataris started doing it about 20 years ago. And that's where really this anti-American sentiment started to grow. You had the Frankfurt School in the 1960s, and you had Saul Alinsky with his horrendous tactics that President Barack Obama adopted, as did Hillary Clinton. And that's way too long to get into, and I don't want to go off on that tangent. But that's investment of the bad kind. Investment of the good kind is what Israel is doing. So yes, we give 3.5 billion, but Israel has to buy 75% of their munitions from the United States of America. So that's going right back into the United States of America. That's generating jobs for the United States of America. Militarily, things like the F-35 got vastly improved because Israel's actually having to use the F-35. So the over-horizon capability of the the heads up displays that Israel has developed and can only give to the United States of America, which then benefits that whole peace through strength thing that I sincerely believe in. That's another one. And then also, we're talking about this open borders that we had under President Barack Obama. Well, where do you think the United States of America is getting all of its intelligence for the bad actors that are coming to the United States from the Middle East? That is coming from Israel. So that return on investment that America is getting and deserves, by the way, I'm not saying Israel's doing it out of the graces of their like the kindness of their own heart. They're doing it because America deserves this and because we are allies. And I am so America first that I don't want the United States and Israel to actually chop that bond that currently ties it, because Israel, I hate to tell everybody, but Israel is going to be just fine if that happens. They bootstrap just about everything. The bandages that our soldiers use on the battlefield is the Israeli bandage. So, like, even the smallest little things, Israel does help out, and they should help out the United States of America because we are allies, and that's what allies do. It's not a zero sum game, it's building everybody and making that pie bigger for both Israel and the United States of America. But when we talk about the investments that the United States of America is putting into Israel, Israel is giving that back and then some.
Yeah, I'd love to see more physical like appearance of that. As an example, like a desalination plant in California would be great. And we'd be like, hey, look what Israel has done for America, and it's helping our water issues or any of the issues that's transpiring in the US. So I love that you're able to share a little bit of insight there. But I'd advocate for more of that to say, hey, like this is a great ally because we're actually getting a lot more out of the deal than what they are getting, and the people would see the receipts and agree with that. But yeah, absolutely.
Uh, Sorry, just want to interrupt 1 second. Israel also sends people to help out with disaster relief all across the United States. So flooding and things like that, they have some of the best crews because there's massive flooding in Israel whenever there's quick storms and things like that. So they do a lot of stuff on the ground. But you're right, Israel's PR, and we talked about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's whole point of Israel, your PR sucks. Completely 100% agree with that. And that's why somebody like me has now apparently gotten a little bit of groundswell because I'm just trying to talk about that so everybody understands it in clean American English.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I've heard the reports of, Christian churches getting bombed right there in Gaza, and it would have been great for Israel to be able to respond to that and have, like you said, that PR with empathy and be able to help, because there are accidents that happen in a war. So it sounds like there is a war that's transpired between the groups, but the PR has made it, a backlash. And so how do we get in there and get more humanitarian aid to even our fellow Christian brothers, right? In both Gaza and the West Bank. So I really hope that Trump has that peace deal that transpires, that we just have, a secure peace in that land, and there's no more issues. And I love that you've already brought up that there's not this hidden agenda to just expand the Israeli empire and build the third temple. So as long as it's like, hey, let's come back to the table and let's have the dialogue and let's help each other in need and actually show the receipts that hey, we are brothers, that we are doing this together. Like I think that's going to be the way forward. So for me, yeah, like is there anything else that you see in social media or any kind of issues that you want to address that and bring light to it and transparency to it that is probably harming the mindset of the regular conservative Republican in today's
Yeah, for me, don't conflate how the majority of American Jews vote with what traditional Judaism and Jewish values are. That's something that is not the fault of Christians and everybody else. That's the fault of the average Jewish voter in the United States of America that does vote for democratic policies that are anti free speech. I don't like the ADL. I am all about rejecting victimhood. I am a mentor to about 30 different students. We meet a couple of times a month in the greater Boston area. That's what I do in my downtime. And I think, not I think, I actually have that on this very Sunday, which is great because the Patriots have their bye week, so I won't miss the football game. But the main thing is don't conflate those two things. You have to reject victimhood status. And that's what I think is really starting to destroy both the left, and that's been there for a long time, but also the right as well. And I got into a little bit of a hot spot that I don't care that I got into when pointing out that JD Vance, who was asked a question by a groyper at a TPUSA event, where the groyper said that the religion of Judaism persecutes Christianity. And there is nothing in Judaism that says that. But the issue that I had with JD Vance's answer, which ignored that question, was that's a victim mentality. And everybody now is trying to make it so that they are the victim. When you start doing that, you're acting not just anti-Christian or anti-Jewish, you're acting anti-American, because America is not made up of victims. America is a country that was founded upon people who overcame some of the hardest struggles in life. They are people like the Pilgrims who were fleeing religious persecution and decided, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this here. I will live with my God and I will figure out how to prosper. But you can't do those things if you are a victim. But when you have somebody like George Soros in the Open Society, who is a well-known Jew, trying to push that stuff, I understand where that perspective comes from. At the same time, you should look at the Jews who reject that, like a Dennis Prager and a Ben Shapiro, and teach, go back to church, go to your synagogue, engage with your community. That's what Jewish values are. That's what Christian values are. And for our purposes, that's what American values are. So I get it when somebody has a certain perspective. Just know that's not the Jewish perspective. Those are Jews who aren't acting like Jews. And that's why people like me very much get angry when we see them getting platformed by others, because that's not my religion. That's not my history. And more than anything else, that's not America.
Well, what I'd love to do is kind of close this episode out, and our next time, hear from our viewers on some more controversial questions that we can address, and we can bring that to light. And the one thing that I got out of this in particular is that there is no, hidden evil Jewish agenda to enslave the Christians out there. And if we could just go, great, tick that box. One thing I want to encourage all of us is to get back to, like you said, going back to church, going back to synagogue, but most important is that dinner with your community, right? So for you, it's Shabbat. For us, we need to bring that back. And, we talk about the Lord's Supper. There was a dinner. There was a grouping of people that were not like-minded. The only like-mindedness was Christ, but they were from all different walks of life. And so we need to actually invite everyone back to that dinner table and have that dinner and have those dialogues and really figure out the needs of our local community and have agency like Charlie Kirk wants us to have, be responsible for our family, be responsible for our community, and actually focus on us now and then grow from there. And I think that we'll see an incredible America after that. That's one thing I want to really push for. And Jake, this has been Fresh Air. Thank you so much for jumping on here and having the dialogue. You're a true patriot. I would love to have you on more and more. And let's just actually use this time to actually bring things out of the darkness into the light and let viewers know like really what's going on. And we can actually deal with those hard conversations, have the questions, and know that there's no psyops that's going on, and get back to building America the way we saw that we wanted to fit, which is like family first. I love that you're pro-America. I just want to leave it at that. Thank you so much, Jake.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Brandon. Can't wait to do this again, sir. And good luck.
Thank you so much. Okay.